everyone, it's Hailey, and today I'm going to be talking about some books that I really would like to reread. So rereading is something that I don't really get to do often, and it's because there are so many stories that are constantly coming out, and there's so many that I'm interested in and so many that I own that I haven't gotten the chance to read yet. So I feel really guilty whenever I want to reread something, and for that reason, it's not something that I get the chance to do a lot. It's also a really interesting experience for me whenever I reread something because it doesn't matter at what speed I read a book or anything like that. I barely ever remember what has happened in a book. I just have a terrible memory. It's the way my brain works. I can reread a book and it's like I've read it for the first time, and I will even be taking notes while I'm reading the book and still I will retain virtually nothing. I don't know why, it's the way it is, and it's very unfortunate, which is why I try and take notes while I'm reading so then I can refer back to them, but it still really sucks. But today I wanted to talk about some books that I would like to try and reread when I get the chance to. I'm going to try and reread some of them soon. A couple of them I actually know I'll be rereading soon, but without further ado, let's just get into it. So I guess I should start out with the two that I will probably be rereading soon. I am pre-filming this video. I'm not exactly sure when it's going to be going up, but I'm pre-filming stuff in preparation for when I'm going to be away in California, so I will have probably already finished my reread of this book by the time this video goes up, but that is Daisy Jones and the Six by Taylor Jenkins Reid. Unlike Hannah, I don't plan to reread this book 4 times, even though it is an amazing book and I really, really loved it. I don't think I would be able to reread the same book a million times. I just would feel so guilty for it. But that being said, this was the bookmarked book club pick. That is like a tongue twister there. For March, it was our very first book that we read, and I listened to the audiobook, absolutely fell in love with the story, but I'm very interested to see what it's going to be like to physically read it, so I think that I'm going to reread it physically, but I also might just listen to the audiobook again because I loved it so much. Maybe I'll listen to the audiobook and follow along. I don't know, I can do both, but I plan on rereading this before the live show, which is at the end of March, so that will have all probably already happened by the time you see this video, so I'll leave a link for all that stuff down below. But speaking of bookmarked, the next book that I plan on rereading is one that I had wanted to reread already because I read the ARC before it even came out and no one was really talking about it, and then the sequel came out and everyone fell in love with the story, and I have the sequel and I haven't gotten the chance to read it yet, but it's looking like it's going to be our April book of the month. The poll is still going when I'm filming this, so I don't actually know, but fingers crossed that it will be Scythe by Neal Shusterman. This is a really cool story, kind of like a twist on the Grim Reaper. It's a dystopian, which is something that I haven't really been into recently, but this is one that is so unique that I really loved the story the first time around, and in order to be able to read the sequel, I need a refresher on the original stories, so I'm not sure if I'm going to go the audiobook route or physically, but this is definitely a world that I would like to re-enter very soon, and like I said, hopefully it will happen in April. Also, if you don't know what Bookmarked is, I have all the information for that down below, but it is a weekly live show that I do with Hannah from A Clockwork Reader and Zoe from Read by Zoe every Friday night at 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and we also started doing a book club because a lot of you guys had wanted us to do one, so all that information will be down below. The next book that I want to reread is actually an entire series, and that is the Harry Potter series by J.K. Rowling. I was a late bloomer to Harry Potter. I only actually got through all of the books when I was 20, I believe, but I've always been familiar with the story and the world, mostly through the movies. I was just a lazy child, so I never actually read them, but there are so many things that I don't remember happening in the Harry Potter books, and I just feel like that's always a lovely world to revisit, and a lot of the books I've only actually ever listened to on audio, so I would like to go through and physically read them, but I think my hesitation is the fact that they get to be so big, and that just will make me feel even more guilty for not reading one of the books that has been waiting for me on my TBR. But rereading the Harry Potter books is something that I had said I really wanted to get to this year, so I'm going to try, and maybe I'll reread one a month. That should be an attainable goal, but I'm kind of waiting until I'm officially fully out of my reading slump before I commit to rereading anything, but I think Harry Potter is going to be my priority off of this list. Next is An Absolutely Remarkable Thing by Hank Green. I listened to the audiobook for this book and I enjoyed it, but I didn't really get what all the buzz was about, and I know this book has some pretty polarizing opinions, but I would like to give it a go in physical form and see if that kind of changes my opinion because I didn't dislike the story. I just had very mixed feelings on it. I fell kind of right in the middle, but it was a really relatable story for me. So I think maybe I would pick up on more of that if I actually physically read it. I don't know if that makes any sense, but this is like a sci-fi sort of story. So there's this Carl, which is just this giant statue that appears, and the main character, April May, she is the one to notice it, and she puts up this video all about this Carl, and she ends up unexpectedly going viral and becoming this whole social media sensation. So it's basically how she deals with that, her downfall from it really, and what comes next and what the Carls actually are. So it's a very multifaceted story, which I think is maybe why the audiobook wasn't the right route to go for me. I liked it, but I think that maybe there was too much going on for me to really engross myself in the world and the story. So if I start rereading the physical copy and I still feel kind of meh about it, then I will just DNF it and accept that it is just a meh book for me. Next is the Infernal Devices trilogy by Cassandra Clare. On Bookmarked, we were talking about characters, and I realized that I don't remember any of the characters from this book. I haven't read a Mortal Instruments book or a Cassandra Clare book in general in a very long time, but when City of Bones first came out, I fell in love with that original trilogy, and then the next 3 books came out and I was kind of like meh about it, but then I read the Infernal Devices and I also really enjoyed these books. So I think I want to reread these in preparation for The Last Hours, which I think, if I'm remembering correctly, and everyone in the comments will tell me if not, but I think that it has something to do with this original series. The reason that I haven't continued is because I have mixed feelings in general, and now it's just so big that I could never again. Like, there's so many things going on. All the stories interconnect, which is really cool, but it's just way too much for me to handle. But since I did enjoy this series so much, since The Last Hours has something to do with it, I think I might actually pick it up. I did pre-order it, so I kind of committed to it. Next is Shadow and Bone by Leigh Bardugo. So I would like to reread the original Grisha trilogy because, like many other books, when I first started BookTube, I fell in love with so many of the stories that I was reading, and I don't know if it's just because reading was something that I had kind of recently discovered, and I was discovering all these new books and so many other people were loving them, so I was like, well, I must love them too. But I remember loving this original trilogy. So many people don't like it now, which I had never heard of before, so I'm kind of interested to see if upon rereading it, I would be like, maybe I just felt like I had to like it. That's something that I kind of struggled with before I ever started actually making videos. Like, obviously, I have my own opinions and I don't really care about what anyone else thinks, but I just feel like I'm an entirely different person now, and rereading a lot of the books that I loved before, I don't know if I would enjoy them again. This is one that I can think of. Anna and the French Kiss, I feel like I definitely wouldn't like. The Selection series by Kira Cass, like, those are some books that I thought were my favorites, but I don't know if they really would be anymore. Shadow and Bone, I think, might still be a favorite just because I love Leigh Bardugo so much, and I really do love the Grisha universe, and I think the original trilogy is really inventive. I liked this story, but I think rereading it would be very fascinating. On that same note, I would also like to reread Six of Crows, and that's because I love all of these characters so much, and I would just like to revisit them, revisit the Grisha universe, and just get immersed in all of it. Like, the whole Six of Crows duology, I would like to definitely reread basically every day of my life. Next is The Raven Boys by Maggie Stiefvater. This is one that I think I would want to reread because I loved the characters so much. So I think I would like to see these characters again, and it would be like coming home in a way, which I think is the mark of a really great book. I also, when I was looking for this book on my shelf, I realized I haven't talked about this book in so long. I used to talk about it all the time, but I haven't talked about it in a really long time, and I think that's because it's one of those books that everyone knows about, so I don't really recommend it often because usually people know about it already, but I couldn't even remember where it was on my shelf, and I was like, you know what? I would just really like to read this whole quartet again and get lost with Blue and the Raven Boys, and I just think it would be a fabulous time. It's kind of like The Book Thief and like Alice in Wonderland. Those are books that I didn't include on this list, but I would definitely like to reread, but they're books that I loved so much that I would like to reread them to remember why I loved them so much, and every time you kind of see something different, so I do enjoy rereading. I can't do it. Next is Turtles All the Way Down by John Green. This one I read when it first came out and I loved it, but I don't really remember the story that much. I remember the characters because I think it really was more character driven. Like, there is a plot to it, but that's not really the central plot. The central plot is really the health and mental well-being of the main character. So I feel like this is a story that is so different and very out of the box for John Green, in my opinion, again, and it's just a character that I would like to revisit. And finally is the Throne of Glass series by Sarah J. Maas. I feel like when I first read this, I didn't realize how problematic it was, but now knowing the kind of aspects of it that aren't so great, this is really the same situation as Shadow and Bone, where everyone loved it and now a lot of people don't. But when I say that, I'm not saying I want to go into it and be like, oh yeah, I don't like it because everyone else doesn't. It's just one of those things where I have new knowledge, I have a new mindset, and I'm more of a critical reader now than I was then. So I think that going into it and going into each book in the series specifically, because Heir of Fire was like the first series where I didn't give all of the books 5 out of 5 stars, because I always felt like I had to give, if I liked the first book, I would have to give the rest of them 5 out of 5 stars. But that is something that I quickly learned was not true at all. I did the same thing for Mockingjay. I gave it a lower rating, but Heir of Fire was one of the first ones because I was like, I didn't really like this one as much. But this series is just so confusing. There's so many things going on, and I do want to read Kingdom of Ash. I've gotten this far and I want to know how it's going to end, and I think that reading the entire thing would be very interesting, and I'm curious to see if my opinion would change as a changed reader. I don't know. So those are just some of the books that I'm hoping to reread at some point, but I think they are the main ones that stick out in my mind. I find it fascinating to see how your opinion changes on the things that you love as you grow up, because I think that's something that definitely does happen. So really, I would like to be able to reread all of the books on my shelf that I loved all the time, but unfortunately there are just so many news stories to keep up with that is just not possible. But please let me know what books you would like to reread if you like rereading. I think it's something that's interesting to discuss, because as readers you constantly want to be introduced to new worlds, but then there's also a lot of readers who love to revisit old worlds, and I feel like I'm a mixture of the two, so I'm interested in your opinion on that. But thank you guys so much for watching today's video. If you enjoyed, don't forget to click that subscribe button and then click that bell icon so you'll be notified whenever I post. I post new videos every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Thank you so much for watching once again, and I will see you in my next video. Bye!